So today we have to start with our liquidation process, the chapter 3, that is for the liquidation process. We need to start with this. But before we go ahead, we can just do a quick recap of the CIRP process, what we had done, the corporate insolvency resolution process. So how does the CIRP process start? If we have to do a quick recap of that. By the way, have you all read section 29A properly? That was like, again, I said that that was the most important section, section 29A. You'll get who are eligible, who are not eligible. But anyway, to do a quick recap. So CIRP first has to begin, but for CIRP, the person needs to be a corporate debtor and the corporate debtor needs to do a default. And the default should be of minimum 1 crore rupees. After that, the application will be made to NCLT, correct? The application will be made to the adjudicating authority, that is NCLT. Now, who can make this application? So application will be made to the NCLT and the application can be made by, now you can also participate and you can also answer who all will be there.
FCOC and
FC and the corporate debtor itself.
So financial creditor, operational creditor and corporate debtor itself, right? Thereafter, what NCLT is going to do? NCLT will take how many days time to ascertain the default?
14 days.
Correct.
14 days.
So NCLT within 14 days will ascertain the default and thereafter NCLT is going to reject the application or NCLT is going to accept the application, right? Once the application is accepted, we say the CIRP has commenced, correct? All right. Now further, if we see application by financial creditor would be under section,
7,
this will be under section
8, 9,
and this will be under
10.
section 10. Okay. Now, once the CIRP gets commenced, what are the three things that happen?
Moratorium is
Moratorium,
Public announcement.
moratorium, public
public
announcement, and the appointment
and
of interim resident,
IRP.
right? The IRP will do the public announcement and the public announcement will be done in how many newspapers?
2 newspapers.
2,
Two
English
new.
and vernacular.
Very good. This will be done in two newspapers, one of which would be English and the other would be the
Vernacular.
vernacular language. Okay. Now, next that we have to do, what is going to be the role of interim resolution professional? What does IRP is going to do? Interim resolution professional is going to collect and collate the claims. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The claims which are received. Then IRP is going to constitute the committee of creditors. The committee of creditor will comprise of
Financial creditors.
all the
All
financial
financial.
all the financial creditors except the related party. Apart from that, if all the financial creditors are related party or if there is no financial creditor, then the 18,
18
Large.
don't forget the word largest, okay?
Okay.
Operational creditor, then one representative
Work
of the
from workman
workman,
and
and one from
employee.
the employees.
one from the employees. Correct. Now, uh, what else? What else will be done? Now then, in the first meeting of committee of creditors,
RP are appointed.
so basically IR the either the IRP will be appointed as RP,
RP.
correct?
Yes.
Or you would say the IRP will be
Replaced by another.
replaced with another RP. If
With
replaced with
written
another,
consent.
yes, with the written consent, that is a common thing. So wherever you will appoint any IRP, RP or any person to replace them, you would require written consent from that person. So if you have to replace for this, what needs to be done? Application to NCLT, yes or no?
Yes.
And then NCLT will forward it to IBBI,
IBBI.
and then IBBI is going to confirm, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thereafter, what is going to happen?
Claim.
No, thereafter, the committee of credit, basically, thereafter RP is going to prepare the information memorandum.
Information. Yes.
Prepare the information memorandum, and what else along with information memorandum? What the RP is going to prepare?
List of prospective invitee.
So for that, there was one word we had written specifically for that. Interest.
EOI.
Correct. So what is EOI? EOI, expression of interest.
Expression of interest.
Okay. Also, remember one more thing. Along with the information memorandum, I forgot to discuss about one thing, that is evaluation matrix. Along with the information memorandum, rather I should write it this way. So others, just listen this thing. Information memorandum and the evaluation matrix. Now, what is evaluation matrix? Like how you will be tested, how your resolution plan would be tested. You will see an evaluation matrix, and based on this, expression of interest would be invited. Right? In that, what is going to happen? The resolution applicants are going to submit the resolution plan. Yes or no? Or
Yes.
you can say the resolution applicants are going to submit their expression of interest to the resolution professional. Thereafter, what RP is going to do? Thereafter, RP is going to
Publish.
publish.
No.
No, sorry.
RP submit the plan to COC.
So before submitting the plan to COC, what RP will do?
RP go through with plans
The
and
due diligence of,
due diligence. Yes.
so RP will do the due diligence of the applicants
Applicants
with respect to their eligibility.
eligibility.
Thereafter, resolution or the RP is going to invite for the resolution plan. Yes or no? Or then RP will prepare the final list of resolution applicant. Correct? And then RP will receive the resolution plan. Please don't write resolution plan as RP. RP short form only for resolution professional. Okay. So don't make RP as a resolution plan, and don't use, avoid in exam also, I would say avoid short form as RP. RP is going to receive the resolution plan. Then RP is going to lay before
Lay before the
COC
COC.
all plans received. Correct? And thereafter, what COC is going to do? COC is going to approve the resolution plan.
Approve the resolution plan with 51%.
51 or 66?
सर प्लान अप्रूव करते तो 51 है ना.
चेक करिए सेक्शन 30 66. Okay.
तो सर 51%.
51% where nothing is mentioned. 51%. चलिए, we'll make a list of that also. I had asked, by the way, in the last lecture to make a list. कितनों ने बनाया वो list? And thereafter, RP will what do? RP is going to forward the approved plan to the NCLT. Correct. Thereafter, NCLT will either accept and approve the resolution plan, or NCLT is going to reject. If NCLT rejects, then liquidation. Of course, the appeal can be made. Okay, the appeal can be made only when the NCLT rejects the application, or even on acceptance, the appeal can be made. When does the appeal, when you can make an appeal?
In both cases.
Both the cases, because they said any order of NCLT is appealable. Okay, so you can
Yes.
make an appeal. So don't just narrow the provision that it can be appealed only when the plans are rejected. Okay, so this is the scenario. Also, one more thing. What is the timeline? What is the timeline for CIRP? What is the timeline for CIRP? 1, 2, 3.
Maximum
180 days from the date of
from the date of
So it should be
acceptance.
completed within maximum
180
180 days from
from the
Date
date
of
of
acceptance.
acceptance. What?
acceptance.
Acceptance of application.
From the date of acceptance of application by NCLT to commence CIRP. Okay, or you can say within 180 days from the date of commencement of CIRP. Okay, short में हो जाएगा commencement of CIRP. All right, then
One
Then
time extension.
one time or
single.
single extension. One time is also correct. One time or single extension can be granted for
For
maximum
maximum 90 days.
90 days. And thereafter, SR still happened. Ruyas.
Overall,
Overall, CIRP must be completed.
within 330 days.
Very, very good. Must be completed within 330 days, including
Including
Legal
legal proceedings.
proceedings.
rather. इसी को filter out करके लिखते हैं, including time taken for any legal proceeding.
Okay.
Right? Time taken for any legal proceeding. All right. Okay. Then the approval of COC. So voting of COC. So where nothing is mentioned, 51%. But otherwise, you need 90%. 90% for
Withdrawal of
withdrawal of the application. Okay. Then 66%
for replacement or
for
extension.
for extension, for appointment of RP, for the appointment of RP, then for the replacement of RP,
RP.
for the replacement of RP, then
Certain cases. नहीं,
सेक्शन नंबर बता दीजिए, आपका पॉइंट मैं समझ गया.
section number 29. I think
29.
certain cases where COC approval is needed.
So decisions taken by RP
RP, हाँ.
requiring prior COC approval. Correct?
Yes, sir.
What else?
In section 28 maybe.
Correct. Section 28. Okay. Replacement is 27. We'll write the section number and all also. And last is for the approval of the plan. Correct. So where does the approval of plan take place? So this is section 12A. Extension is applied under section.
12.
Very good. 12. Appointment of RP under section
16.
60.
16.
No.
166. No.
16 कैसे होगा? 21 में COC बनता है.
Oh,
COC
yes,
अपॉइंट
yes.
करेगा. लॉजिक.
Yes. 24.
24 कैसे हो सकता है? 24 में तो मीटिंग हो गया COC का. COC बनते ही सबसे पहले क्या होगा? As soon as the COC is formed, RP will be appointed. Correct?
Yes, sir.
COC is formed in which section? 21. So this is 22.
20.
Okay, just the way to remember. This is just the way to
Yeah.
remember. Then replacement. Replacement is done under section. Replacement is done under section.
27.
27.
27. This is 28. Okay. So just try to remember it this way. In 28, he had to take the decision prior. Since he did not take, so replace. So prior 28 ka prior 27. Right? Got it? And then approval of the resolution plan. So when the resolution plan will be approved?
31.
31. 31 में तो NCLT अप्रूव करता है.
Oh. In 30.
In 30. Okay.
Okay.
And this is under section 30. So this is there. And in any other cases, 51%.
Okay.
Correct?
Sir. Okay.
Any other case, 51%. So I'll write here. Any other case, 51%.
सर ये कहाँ पे है मेंशन किया है कि एनी अदर केस 51%?
ये अगर आप यहाँ पे अपना कमिटी ऑफ क्रेडिटर्स वाला अगर आप देखोगे सेक्शन 21 को,
Yes.
नॉट 21, 24,
Yes.
वहां पर आपको मिलेगा.
Okay.
वहां पर आपको मिलेगा सेक्शन 24 के अंदर. आप चेक करिए. इफ यू हैव द बेयर एक्ट इन फ्रंट ऑफ यू, आई विल टेक यू देयर. So where we are discussing about the appointment of the meeting of the committee of creditors. 25. So the resolution plan, this. No, I think
अरे सेक्शन इटसेल्फ में है कि रेगुलेशन में है?
no, regulation में नहीं है. Then it is, I think, committee of creditors 21. I think it is 21, section 21. I'll tell you. I think it was 21. Sorry, when I missed it. Yeah, this one. Just see this. Section 21, subsection 8. Okay. Got it?
Okay, sir.
Right. So this is there. Now what we have to start? Now we need to start with the liquidation process. And liquidation process, we know. When does the liquidation process is going to start? So there are two liquidation process we will discuss about. One is the liquidation process. This is the liquidation process due to the non-approval of resolution plan. Okay. Or you can say due to the failure of corporate insolvency resolution process. The CIRP has failed. Now the CIRP can fail due to any reason. It could be failed because the resolution plan was not made, right? The time has elapsed, but the resolution plan is not made, or the committee of creditors have rejected, or the committee of creditors have resolved that no, this company should be liquidated, or it could be due to that NCLT rejected the resolution plan which was approved by the committee of creditor, and no one made an appeal, or if the appeal was made, the appeal was not upheld, that was rejected, and the stance of the NCLT was upheld that yes, the company deserves to get into liquidation, or the resolution plan should not be. So basically, one question which you will get is, when can the liquidation process be initiated? So just understand, this is the liquidation process which is getting initiated because the corporate insolvency resolution process has failed, or the resolution plan could not get approved. Okay, so you need to understand this first point, because we'll study section 59 also. So section 59 talks about the liquidation process which is voluntary in nature, right? So the provisions from Companies Act has been deleted and you have got it here. So don't mingle the two provisions, right? So this is there. Now just see where the adjudicating authority. So this is for the initiation of the CIRP. So here, if I say where the adjudicating authority, or I'll do one thing, I'll pick up this from my slides only, this ebook only, because in this ebook you'll get some more content which is much readable for you all, right? So this is from here. So just see, this is the liquidation process, and this is the liquidation process after the CIRP has failed, or there was no resolution plan approved. Now just see. So where the adjudicating authority before the expiry of the CIRP period, right? Or the maximum time period which is permitted for the completion of CIRP, or in case of a fast track CIRP. So there the timelines get reduced to half. So we'll cover this tomorrow, but right now just understand the time period, maximum time period has expired. Okay, and the resolution plan is not received, does not receive a resolution plan. Then in that case, the NCLT is going to pass the liquidation order. And then if the where the adjudicating authority has rejected the resolution plan, so here the resolution plan was received, but the resolution plan is now rejected. Why? For the non-compliance of the orders which was passed, or the public announcement, or require such order to be sent to authority in which the corporate debtor is registered. So basically it will pass the order, make the public announcement, right? And thereafter it will also send that notice to the corporate, basically authority where it is registered. So basically it is the ROC that the liquidation order has commenced. Then we have where the resolution professional at any time during the CIRP process, but before the confirmation of the resolution plan, intimates to the adjudicating authority what, that the committee of creditors have approved by not less than 66%. So now we have a new percentage, that 66% is needed to pass the liquidation order also. Okay, so has not basically approved by not less than 66% of the voting share, that it is better we liquidate the corporate debtor. Then again in that case the adjudicating authority is going to pass the order, issue a public announcement, and submit the resolution plan, basically submit the order to the authority where it is registered. Then where the resolution plan is approved by the adjudicating authority is contravened. So third condition is this, not third, technically this is the fourth one, that the resolution plan, this was approved, but then it was contravened by the concerned corporate debtor. Then again, any person other than the corporate debtor whose interests are prejudicially affected. So any person whose interests are prejudicially affected by such contravention can make the application to the adjudicating authority that please make the liquidation order. So take for example, you are one of the creditor, then the resolution applicant had promised to pay you the money in full, but now he is not paying. The resolution applicant has paid you only 60%. For balance 40%, the resolution applicant is not paying you as per the timelines what was committed. So in that case, again, the person whosoever is affected, so in this case you can go to NCLT and you can pass the order. Now basically you not go to NCLT giving the reason that no, this company has defaulted. So let's start a CIRP process again from section 7, because then it is going to be bad for you, because you have already waited for almost 180 days and that 90 days extension time period, and whatever the time 330 days time period is there. Now again, you'll have to go through the same process again. So it's not viable. So already the company has gone through the CIRP. The resolution applicant who came up with the plan has assured, and after that the person is not paying, so again liquidation of the corporate debtor is going to take place. So this is what is being given here, that again the resolution plan one was approved, but it was contravened by the concerned operational corporate debtor. So then any person whose interests are affected can go to NCLT. By the way, I missed one thing I had to discuss with you. How does the evaluation matrix look like? Right. So just check, how does the evaluation matrix look like? Right. So just see, evaluation matrix looks something like this. So here I'll say, let's say this is 0 to 6 months. Then I write 6 months to 1 year. Then I say 1 to 2 years. Then I say more than 2 years. This is what, if you pay the money within 0 to 6 months, so you'll be given a point. Now again, I'll write here 100%, 90%, like 90 to 100%. Okay, this way, 90 to 100, not 100 actually, 90 to 99.99%. But do you understand now what I'm trying to say? Right. So this is 90 to 99%. Then I make a plan where I say, okay, 80 to 89%, right? And then I say 75%. Below that, if someone is paying, the person is not eligible. So here I would say I'll give 50 points. Here I'll give, let's say 40 points. Here I'll give, let's say 30 points. Here I'll give 20 points. Same way here also, 40, 30, 20, and then 30, 20, 10. That's 20, 10, and 5. Here I say 10, and then let's say 5, and then let's presume here I'll give 4. Just a evaluation. So now any person, so I give an example. Let's say resolution applicant A has come. A says that I am going to pay the money. Okay, I'll pay 95% and I am going to pay within 6 months. So we'll say, okay, as per A, he falls into this category. So A is going to get 40 points, right? So A's plan is there. So this is for A. Then I say there is another resolution applicant who says that I'm ready to pay 100%, but I'll pay within a period of 2 years. So we'll say, okay, so this is plan B. Then there is another person C who says that I will pay within 1 year, and within 1 year I'll pay 100%. So we'll say, okay, this is C. Then there is another who says that I am ready to pay 75% of the amount instantly. So we'll say, okay, this is plan D. Right. So this way the resolution plans will be ranked. Okay. And this is evaluation matrix. So this will be issued along with the information memorandum, so that whenever the person sends the expression of interest, so in that case, the person knows that on what basis my evaluation plan, basically the resolution plan is going to get evaluated. Okay. If the resolution plan is going to be evaluated in this way, I would want, I'll not fall in 99. I would say I'll just pay 90 and I'll be here, or within how many time the payment should be done, and all those things I'm going to. So it's basically, like for old syllabus students, you all know that insolvency is part is going to be tested for 20 marks. Valuation would be tested for 30 marks. Now for new syllabus students, you all don't know for how many marks the valuation will be there in the exam. So you sort of make some arrangements accordingly. Okay, so old syllabus students are more concerned about valuation. Like even when I get any inquiry for my classes and all, the first thing old syllabus students ask, sir, valuation mein kitna padhoge? How many questions you are going to cover in valuation? Will that be taught properly, or it is going to be taught upar se? New syllabus students do not discuss this about valuation. They say that, sir, will you teach us part A, part B, like entire CRI you are talking about? You are talking about only part of that. So that's how it goes. So evaluation matrix is this, so that you know how it is your resolution plan is going to be tested, right? So here again we got deviated, but okay, let's discuss here again. So when will the liquidation take place? So this can be one of the question. When the liquidation will take place? So one, or liquidation under section 33. Okay. So liquidation under section 33 is going to take place. First is when the resolution plan is not received. So this is due to the non-receipt of resolution plan. This is due to the non-receipt of resolution plan. Then what is second? That the resolution plan.
CIP fail.
So all of them is, you can say CIRP has failed. Here we will say the resolution plan is rejected. It is rejected by the NCLT, right? Then third case where we say that the COC decides, okay? The COC decides, or a better word, COC resolves to liquidate the corporate debtor via 66% voting, correct? And then we have the fourth case where we would say that the resolution plan approved by NCLT is contravened, correct? So the resolution plan which was approved by NCLT is contravened. Then in that case, any person who is prejudicially affected can file the application. Okay, guys, this is clear. Is this point clear?
Yes, sir.
So just remember this. This is an important question for your exam. So this is basically the liquidation order under section 33. Okay, right? So let's see. Then on the receipt of the application under subsection 3, so adjudicating authority is going to determine whether the contravention has been done or not, and then accordingly pass the order. Then it says that subject to section 52, when a liquidation order has been passed, again you see, no suit or legal proceedings shall be instituted by or against the corporate debtor. So this is again like a moratorium only. Yes or no? Yes or no, guys? This is again like a moratorium. But will you
Yes, sir.
say after the liquidation order is made, moratorium sets in?
No.
Why? Why?
मोराटोरियम तो जब लिक्विडेशन का ऑर्डर पास होता है तो वो उस टाइम पे एंड
Moratorium
हो
is
जाता है.
a delay. Here you are not delaying. Okay, moratorium is a delay. There is a, that's a kind of I won't say lock-in is a right word, but that's a time where you freeze the process, all these for it. Here you are not freezing the process. Okay, here it is gone, you cannot file only, right? So subject to section 52, when the liquidation order is made, no suit or liquidation proceeding will be filed or instituted against the corporate debtor. Then again, where a suit is already, which may be instituted, again it will be with the prior approval of NCLT. So only with the prior approval of the adjudicating authority, the resolution plan would be approved, or whatever. Not a resolution plan, the suit or the proceedings will be approved by the NCLT. Only then you can file the case, otherwise you will not be allowed. Then These shall not apply to the transactions which government or financial, so this is fine. And then the order of liquidation under this section shall be deemed to be the notice of discharge of the employees. Just remember this part. Once the liquidation order is being made, it is by default a notice of discharge for all the employees. This company is not going to exist or survive longer in the coming time. So this is, you are automatically discharged. So you don't need a termination letter once the order is being made. So this is there. So the liquidation process can be initiated these cases, right? And the public announcement will be made, right? And if you see public announcement everywhere, it is same. Can you see same like takeover regulation? If you see the public announcement, even in mergers and amalgamation also. So everything is same. One in English, one is regional language. Another, it will be placed on the website of the corporate debtor and also on the website of the IBBI, right? Then you see appointment of the liquidator and fees to be paid. So just understand here the liquidator will get replaced. Okay. The liquidator will get replaced, or rather I would say the resolution plan, the professional may get replaced with some new person. Now this can be again an independent question in the exam, that when is that RP becomes a liquidator, and in what cases RP does not become a liquidator. In what cases RP is not being required to make the liquidator here. So just see, where the adjudicating authority passes the order for liquidation of the corporate debtor under section 33, the resolution professional appointed for the CIRP, subject to the submission of a written consent to act as liquidator, such person will act as the liquidator for the purpose of this, unless the person is replaced by the adjudicating authority under subsection 4. Okay, is this clear? RP is going to continue as the liquidator after submitting his written consent, and unless he has submitted. So do you think he has to submit, do you think any separate order will be made for his appointment, for the appointment of liquidator? Do you think there is any other appointment letter and everything is to be made, or the committee or the court will have to pass the order? Answer is no, because it is written in the act that the resolution professional is going to continue, but the resolution professional will have to submit what? The resolution professional will have to submit the written consent. So with the help of written consent, the person is automatically appointed, unless the NCLT replaces such person and says that we need to appoint some other person, and that is going to happen under subsection 4. So let's first read subsection 4, and this is again. So these are the cases where we say the resolution professional will not be the liquidator. Okay, the resolution professional will not be the liquidator, and here we say the resolution professional will be the liquidator. Guys, is this point clear? Is this point clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just see in what cases the liquidator resolution professional will not be appointed as the liquidator. So just see the resolution plan submitted by the resolution professional under section 30 was rejected. So just understand, if the resolution plan was rejected for meeting the failure of the requirements, or the board, that is IBBI, recommends for the replacement of the resolution professional, right? Or the resolution professional fails to submit the written consent under subsection 1. In that case, we would say the resolution professional would be replaced. Guys, clear? Guys, is
Yes,
this
sir.
clear? So this can be again a straightforward question in your exam, that in what circumstances you would say the resolution professional would be replaced and will not be appointed as the liquidator. So the next important question is that the resolution professional, okay, the resolution professional to act as liquidator, the resolution professional to act as the liquidator, okay, except where, right, when the plan submitted was rejected, the plan which was submitted was rejected. Okay. And why it was rejected?
Non-compliance of the requirement.
Right. So it was rejected due to the failure to meet the requirements under section 30, or what is the second reason where we can say?
IBBI.
So where
When
IBBI recommends the replacement.
and third one is written consent is not made.
Correct. And then we have the third where we say,
Solution professional has not submitted written consent.
so RP failed to submit the consent, the written consent. So this is your question number 2. This was your question number 1. This is your question number 2. Okay. Is this clear? Let's see. Now again, read it here. Now here it says that on the appointment of liquidator, basically all the powers and everything will vest in the hands of the liquidator. And also the personnel of the corporate debtor should extend the coordination. So what was there in section 18 is now section 19, 18, 19 here. Okay. Then the board will propose the name. So this is all fine. The adjudicating authority on the receipt of this. So this is all fine. The insolvency professional. Okay. The insolvency professional to be appointed as the liquidator shall charge such fees and conduct the liquidation proceedings in proportion of the liquidation estate. So what is liquidation estate? We will discuss it right now. And the fees and everything will be paid as per section 53. So this is all fine. Then when the liquidation order, so this is again the repeated point that I have written here. Then you have the powers and duties of the liquidator. So this you can basically just read. There is nothing fancy about it, right? You can just read that the liquidator has to verify the claims. He will take into custody all the assets and the properties. The person is going to take all measures to protect and preserve the assets, right? Then the person is also going to carry on the business of the corporate debtor. So this is same like what was the duties of the resolution professional and the interim resolution professional. Okay. Then so this is all same. If you can just read it, I don't think so this is going to be the question, but this is fine. Also, this is important. So this is an amendment of 2018. So this was written in bold also here, that the resolution professional, right, who is now the liquidator, or the person who is now the liquidator of the corporate debtor, has to ensure that in the liquidation proceeding, the assets of the corporate debtor, okay, is not sold to any such person who is not eligible to submit the resolution applicant. Basically, not eligible under section 29A. So if the person is not eligible to act as a liquidator, okay, sorry, if the person is not eligible to submit the resolution plan, the person cannot act as a resolution applicant due to the disqualifications getting attracted under section 29A. In that case, liquidator has to ensure that when the liquidation proceedings take place and all the assets and liabilities, basically all the assets are being disposed of to realize money and the payments can be made to the creditors. So here they say that it is not, it has to be ensured that the assets are not sold, the immovable property, movable property, or the actionable claims of the corporate debtor is not being sold to any person who is not eligible to be the resolution applicant. Guys, is this clear? Guys,
Yes, sir.
is this clear? Okay. Then resolution professional is going to prepare multiple reports. So you have the preliminary report, asset memorandum, progress report, sale report, minutes of the consultation with the stakeholder, and the final report prior to the, this is resolution, it is dissolution. It's a typing error. So if you see, liquidator is first going to prepare the preliminary report. Now, what is preliminary report? So here, just understand, the liquidator will file a report to the NCLT, right, stating that how many, what are the assets, what are the claims, because liquidator will now fresh make the list of claims and all, right? So this process looks like a repetition, that's already the claims and everything are there. Now why to do that? So again, the fresh claims and everything will be invited here. Okay, so this is what is there. And he's going to submit the capital structure, the estimated assets and liability. And also there is one difference here. And what's the difference? That when the liquidation order will be made again, when the even during the CIRP process, the registered valuer would be appointed, the RV would be appointed, and that RV is going to give the valuation. So quite possible that those 330 days have elapsed and now the valuations of the assets have been changed. Do you understand? Though it looks like exactly same, but during those 330 days or that 180 days, whatever time period during which the CIRP was there, the assets and the liabilities are going to change. The capital structure is also going to change, because even though the company is into CIRP, the business operations are not stalled. Business operations are still on. Okay. The business operations are still going on. So take example for SR Steel. So SR Steel was not shut for 600 days. SR Steel was going on. It was carrying on the business, but the business was carried on by Satish Kumar, who was the resolution professional. He had all the control over the assets of the company. So during this period, now if let's say that SR Steel has the resolution plan could not be approved and it has entered into liquidation. Now tell me one thing, what was valued 600 days before, do you think the valuations are going to remain same? Answer is no. So again, the fresh report is going to be made. So that's where the time period has been given, and it has also been capped that within 75 days from the liquidation commencement date. So what is liquidation commencement date? When the liquidation order is passed by the NCLT under section 33. So liquidator will prepare the preliminary report, and in that preliminary report is going to mention about the capital structure of the corporate debtor, the estimated assets and the liabilities, right? And then again, any further inquiry. So this is another point. He has to do the inquiry from the promotion formation, right, of the corporate debtor, right? And then the proposed plan of action, how the liquidation is going to be carried out and during in how many days, how many assets are there, so when will you sell it, where it will be sold. So it is going to be the preliminary report. Thereafter, once the preliminary report is made, NCLT is going to give the structure, and thereafter the NCLT, basically the asset memorandum will also be submitted. So what is asset memorandum? It contains the list of liquidation estate. Now what is liquidation estate? We will just study right now in section 36, but liquidation estate will be prepared, the list of assets and the liabilities, right? What all assets which can be realized to pay off the liabilities. So this will be there. Progress report would be there. Now what is progress report? Now of course the liquidation process cannot be done completed within one day, right, or in a short period of time. So here, since it goes carries on for some months, in that case liquidator is going to prepare the progress report. So this is the next thing, that is the progress report. Okay, is going to prepare the progress report, and this progress report will be submitted to NCLT, and this will be submitted within 15 days after the end of each quarter in which he is appointed. Okay, and subsequently within 15 days after the end of every quarter in which he acts as the liquidator. And then for the fourth quarter it will be submitted, right, after the closure of the financial the audited financial statements is going to submit it to the NCLT. Guys, this is clear? Guys, this is clear? Progress report. So
Yes.
this was preliminary report. So quite possible you may get a question, what are the different reports which are prepared by the liquidator? So these are the different reports which are prepared by the liquidator. Then you have the sale report. Now what does the sale report? So again the name suggests that what is there will be in the sale report. So liquidation estate, whenever it will be realized, the list will be prepared. These are the sale report, that the asset has been sold to this person, this was the valuation which was done by the registered valuer, and now this is the net amount that has been received and all those things. Then the minutes of the consultation with the stakeholders. So again we'll see uh, the liquidator is going to form some committees, right? And The minutes of such meeting will be again there for the minutes of the consultation, and the final report. So when all the assets are being realized, the liabilities are paid as per section 53, the maximum amount whatever could be paid has been paid, right? Or if all the liabilities are paid, the balance are being distributed to the shareholders of the company, that's where the final report will be prepared and submitted to the NCLT, and then NCLT is going to pass the dissolution order. So just remember this part. I again feel that this is going to be important for your exam. What are the different types of reports a liquidator has to submit to the NCLT, right? Now just see liquidation estate. So what is there in liquidation estate? So though we will be studying about what is there in liquidation estate and what will not be there in liquidation estate, but if I say that to read, just see subsection 3 and we have subsection 4. Okay, subsection 4 says that these should not be included in the liquidation estate, and these assets should be included in the liquidation estate. So what should be included in the liquidation estate? These are basically the assets over which the corporate debtor has the ownership rights, right? Whether it is there in the books of accounts or whether it is there in the custody or not, you have to see the books of accounts of the corporate debtor and see that the corporate debtor is owner of what assets, what securities. So everything will be here, right? Then the assets which may or may not be in the possession of the corporate debtor, but not including but not limited to encumbered assets. So any assets on which the encumbrance and everything is created, even that becomes the part of liquidation estate. Now just understand, when I'm saying that this is going to be part of the liquidation estate, this doesn't mean that liquidator can sell and realize the asset, but yes, that amount will be used for paying the debts of the company. So take for example, I have taken loan from Mansi. Okay, I am a corporate debtor. I have taken loan from Mansi, and I have said that my car, she has a charge over this car. Okay, of my on my car. So if I don't pay the loan or if I don't repay, if I default, then Mansi has full right that she can uh, take my car, take the possession of my car, sell the car, recover her money. So we can say that Mansi has got fixed charge on my asset. So will this car be part of my liquidation estate? You got my question? I
Yes,
had
sir.
step one, I took loan from you, Mansi. Okay, I have taken loan from you. Step two, you created a charge on my car, that is on my asset. And the charge, the terms of the charge are such that if I default, which is usually every business, so if I have if I default, then you are going to take my asset. You will take over this asset and you will recover your dues. This is there. Now, my question is, when the liquidation order has been passed, can you uh, say that this is part of your this is part of my liquidation estate, or the liquidator would say no, on this the entire right is with Mansi only, so this is not part of the liquidation estate?
सर
Yes,
ये जरूरी तो नहीं है ना कि डेप जितना लिया है वो कार का जो चार्ज क्रिएट किया है उतना ही हो सकता है कम का भी लोन लिया हो तो जो एक्स्ट्रा मनी है उसके लिए तो वो यहाँ पे वो बोल ही सकते हैं ना कि
absolutely valid point. So I have taken loan for 1 lakh, but my car is worth 10 lakh rupees. So in this case, Astha ji, आप बताइए, what will be the liquidation estate? 10 lakh or 9 lakh? 9 lakh is the surplus, 10 lakh is the value of car.
सर सरप्लस
Okay. एक बार फिर से पढ़िए. Does it say the surplus in case of encumbered assets? Answer is no. The liquidation estate will comprise of entire 10 lakh rupees. Okay. No doubt, when this asset will be sold, when this asset will be realized, the first payment will be made to Mansi only. And thereafter, if any surplus is there, that will be utilized for paying off the other creditors. But the liquidation estate will be of 10 lakh rupees only. Okay.
ओके सर
Right. So you have to mention that. So tangible assets, whether movable, immovable, same way. Intangible assets, right? And then if there are assets which are into litigations, the ownership is subject to determination by the court or authority, even that will be part. Then any assets which are recovered. So just see any assets which are recovered through the proceedings of the avoidance of transaction. So even this will be there. Then any assets of the corporate debtor in respect of which a secured creditor has relinquished the security interest. So if the secured creditor, so in this case where I say Mansi has relinquished the security interest, okay, she has relinquished the security interest, so even that will be part of the asset. Now what do you mean by relinquish? She has said that I am not going to realize this asset, you can realize this asset. The liquidator can realize the asset and give the money to me. So Mansi has two options. Either Mansi will take the custody of the car and Mansi would say that, okay, I will sell this car, then I will see what amount I get. I'll keep it in my pocket, my dues, and thereafter if any surplus is left, we are going to give it to the liquidator. So here we will say that we don't know what amount will be realized by the basically the secured creditor. So here secured creditor will be given a value that the car is valued by the registered valuer for 10 lakh rupees. So if you can realize more than 10 lakh, well and good. But if you realize less than 10 lakh, quite possible Mansi can say, I could realize only 10,000 rupees. So out of 1 lakh, only 10,000 is recovered from this car. Now give me 90,000 rupees more. So that is not going to happen because the registered valuer is going to do a fair valuation of the asset and mention it to the liquidator that this asset should realize 10 lakh rupees to you. Now, if Mansi would come and say that, no, I could realize only 4 lakh rupees. So Mansi would be asked that, no, if you can realize only 4 lakh, give me the car. I will go and get a valuation of 10 lakh rupees. Got my point? So this is there. Any other property which belongs to the corporate debtor and all the proceedings of the liquidation as and when they are realized. Now, what should not be part of the liquidation estate? So just see the assets which are owned by the third party but are in the possession of the corporate debtor. So take for example, there is a leasehold property. So the leasehold property will not be sold, right? There is a plant and machinery which is taken on rent. So the liquidator cannot come and sell the property or the plant and machinery. Why? Because that does not belong to the corporate debtor. So that's the reason I say this will not be part of the exam question, but this is there. Then assets which are in security collateral held by the financial creditor, right? Then personal assets of the shareholder, assets of any Indian or foreign subsidiary. So basically the assets of subsidiary will also be not part of the liquidation estate. The securities, your shares which you hold in the subsidiary company will be there, but not the assets of the subsidiary company. So again, you have that the shareholders are the joint owners, but they are not individual owners of the assets of the company, right? So this is there. The assets still belong to the company. So this is there. So this I have again made it a list. Then as I said, asset sale report will be prepared. So in this asset sale report, the liquidator will prepare the list of assets which are being sold, their realizable value. So just remember, you need to mention this part, the realizable value. What value was realized? Realizable value. What is the cost of realization? What was the mode of sale? Right? If it is realized less than the value which was mentioned in the asset memorandum, that's where the registered valuer provides the value, right? So this was the valuation by the registered valuer. You need to mention that why the value could not be realized, and then the person to whom the sale is made. So this will be there in the asset sale report. 4 things. Thereafter, if you see power of the liquidator to access information, this is again same. So not very relevant, but you can just give a basic reading. Then liquidator is going to do the consolidation of the claim. So this consolidation of the claim should be done within, just see this, within 30 days from the date of commencement of the liquidation process, right? Then whatever claims are being submitted, right? And let's say the creditor believes that his claims are wrongly rejected, then again the creditor can appeal to the NCLT that his or her claims were wrongly rejected or it was wrongly calculated. So you'll get this also. So the financial creditor will provide the list of claim, operational creditor will also submit. So basically whenever you are going to submit the claim, you'll have to prove submit a proof that yes, there is. And then a creditor can also withdraw or vary his claim within 14 days of his submission. So you realize you have submitted a wrong claim, which was less or which could be more. So you can submit the revised claim, but again within 14 days of the submission. Thereafter, verifications will be done by the liquidator. Liquidator will verify and the liquidator will make a list. So liquidator after verification can either admit or reject the claim, either whole or in part. If the liquidator rejects the claim, he shall record it in the writing why the claims was rejected, and then again it will be communicated to the creditor and the corporate debtor within 7 days, right? So if the creditor is there, creditor can also appeal against the decision of the liquidator. Now just see, earlier it was only rejection, but now they have added this word also, accepting or rejecting the claim. So liquidator has accepted the claim of Mansi. Can Astaji go to the NCLT and file a appeal that see this claim has been accepted, but I believe this claim is not valid. Can it so? Can it be done?
Yes, sir.
Right? So just see, but again, Astaji has to be a creditor. Okay. Guys, clear? The
Okay, sir.
interpretation. This is my interpretation. Okay. So
Sir,
this,
it may be that कि I am a OC, मतलब
correct. You are a creditor. You are a creditor. Forget financial operational. Could be possible you are neither financial nor operational creditor, but you are a creditor of the company and you believe that someone's claim has been wrongly accepted. So you can go and appeal, right? Or it could be possible that your claim is admitted, but it is admitted with the wrong amount. So you can again go and claim. So multiple interpretations can be done for this thing, but absolutely the decision of the liquidator can be challenged, right? But this will be challenged within 14 days and the application will be made to the NCLT. Okay, so this is their determination of the valuation of the claim. So the liquidator is going to value. Now we have the avoidance transaction. Now tell me, till here is it clear to all of you? Till here is it clear to all of you?
yes, sir.
Everyone please, others please say, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now the list of all those avoidance transactions starts. Remember last class I had said that there are certain
Yes, sir.
transactions. So these are the avoidance transactions which are going to start now. So now if you see, the avoidance transaction is there. So you have these sections, but I will teach you from here. Just go
Sir,
through
but
this.
avoidant tax transaction in CIRP. So,
It is same. Avoidance
oh,
transaction, whether in CIRP or in liquidation, it is same. So when you will read it, you will realize that the content is. So okay, let's do one thing. We will study the guide note that I have written at the end of the section. Okay. So when you get a question, what is preferential transaction, or write a short note on preferential transaction, the impact of preferential transaction, you just have to write these two blocks. One, what is preferential transaction, and another is avoidance of preferential transaction, what can be done. Same way I have done it for the undervalued transaction. So the four sections which are there for undervalued transactions, and then you have this point. So this is basically what students usually say that sir ये आपने अपना notes दिया है. So these are my notes and these are the notes given by the parliament. Okay, so this is all compilation I have done. And why I had written all this? This was because, as I said, I had made this ebook back in 2018. So at that point of time, there was not much jurisprudence around liquidation because you see, IBC came at the end of 2016, right? And then IBC. So basically, during that time, there was no liquidation order and all which was made. Do you understand? Guys, do you understand? That point of time the liquidation orders and all were not made much, so there was no much jurisprudence around it. So what I did at that point of time, I had compiled it and I had written it in a precise manner, whatever I was discussing in the class. Rather, this is nothing, the typing error also which you saw here, this you will also find it in the liquidation only if there are any, though I've rectified a lot. It's because whatever I'm explaining you, the speech was converted into text and it became like this. Like while explaining undervalued transaction, I exactly dictated this in the class, and this same got converted into text, and I copied it. It got copied in the Word file. I copied from there and I pasted it here in the notes. So this is the same. That's the reason you see, you will find, otherwise you see such transactions, you'll find here some colon or something, right? Hyphen mark or something, but nothing is here. It's because of this reason. So same way, so undervalue transaction, then you have extortionate credit transaction. So again, I've explained extortionate credit transaction here. Okay, so these are the transactions which are, again, I would say, important from your exam perspective, because they have not asked you it in the exam. What I have done here, I have made a compilation of this. So let's first read what is here and then try to read the section. Okay, so one preferential, we'll do it this way. For the undervalued transaction, we'll read the section and then we'll read my guide note, so that you get a complete idea about it. Anyway, you will be reading all, but this will give you some sort of confidence. So just see preferential transaction. So what is preferential transaction? So the name itself suggests that some preference has been given to the person. In a transaction, some preference has been given. So what happens here? In this case, the preference is given by the corporate debtor that any creditor, okay, or any surety or any guarantor, to such person you have transferred the property, right? And you have made that transfer in such a way that the person is now in a better position as compared to what position the person would have been if such a transfer would not have been made. So take for example, again I'll take Mansi's name only. Mansi is my unsecured creditor. Okay. So technically Mansi should not be paid. Astaji is a secured creditor, so Astaji should be paid before, but not in the ordinary course of business. Other than the ordinary course of business, I had transferred the assets to Mansi. Why? Because I said, Mansi, you are one of the related party, or let's say due to any reason, I'm saying that Mansi, please take this asset, because I'm very sure the company is going to get into liquidation, and in that case you will not be recovering any amount. But if you take this asset right now, there is no rule that first I have to pay this person or first I have to pay to that person. Do you understand? Once the company enters into liquidation, then I'm bound that I have to pay as per section 53. But if the liquidation order is not made, there is no sequence in which I have to pay. Yes or no? See, take for example, the company is a going concern. There the provision is that company needs to pay its interest and obligations. Company has to pay the preference dividend before any dividend is paid to equity. Yes or no? But if the company is, and similarly if the payments is made to any unsecured creditor, it can be made. There is no restriction that the payment first have to be made to the secured creditor, only then you can make the payment to unsecured creditors. Do you understand this point? There is no provision in the Companies Act which says that no, till the time the secured creditors exist, you cannot pay to unsecured creditor. So let's say unsecured creditor had given me loan 6 months back, the secured creditor has just given me the loan, right? So it is possible I will pay before. But if the company gets into liquidation, then this will not be seen, that when the debt had arisen. Once the liquidation order is made, you will just see that who is secured, who is unsecured, and then we'll say the secured should be paid before the unsecured creditors. Got my point? So I am telling Mansi that, Mansi, please take the assets, right? Please take this asset. I'm transferring this asset to you. Please take this asset and just move out of the company. Why? Because if you remain in the company, if I do not pay you right now, if you don't take this asset right now, then believe me, once the company enters into liquidation, you will get nothing. You'll get absolutely nothing. So don't waste your time. Take this money and go away. So this is what I'm doing. Out of my all creditors, I'm giving a preference to Mansi, and I'm putting it in a beneficial position. I'm putting it in a better position, in a better state than she would have been if I had not done this kind of a transfer. Guys, this is clear. Now, such a transfer is prejudicial to the other creditors of the company, and that's where the liquidator or the resolution professional have been casted this responsibility, that when you are investigating the proceedings of the company, when you are checking all the work of the company, you know, In that case, when you're doing the review of the affairs of the company, at that point of time, it's your responsibility to check that such a preferential transaction had not taken place. If you see such preferential transaction has taken place, whenever you get to know, please report it to NCLT, and then NCLT will make such transaction void. Guys, is this clear? Guys, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
the
Yes,
entire
sir.
the entire crux of avoidance transaction is this, that out of your all the creditors, you have put some person in a beneficial position, or you have prejudicially affecting the rights of the other person in the company. Therefore such transaction would be made as void. Now just remember, who are the person to with whom I am doing the preferential transaction. So I said, Mansi, either you are my related party or you are not my related party. So does it make a difference? Answer is yes. If you are my related party, then IBC says that liquidator, don't just check for some time period, check for a longer time period. But if it's not a related party, then just see for a lesser time period. Do you see? If it's a related party, I'll have to see for more time period. But if it's a non-related party, then I have to check only for lesser time period. What is this more? What is this less? So 2 years prior to the CIRP. Now just understand, it's not liquidation. 2 years prior to the CIRP period. When my CIRP started, उससे 2 साल पहले मेरे को देखना है if you are my related party. If you are not my related party, then 1 year prior to the CIRP. So this is there, right? So just see, preferential transaction is one where the corporate debtor at the relevant time. So what is this relevant time? This is the relevant time, right? At the relevant time gives preference by way of transfer of an property or an interest thereof for the benefit of the creditor. Now just see, all these things needs to be established. Now I'll tell you what we are reading right now is not real fun. The real fun is when you actually have to prove it in the court that this was a preferential transaction or this was not a preferential transaction. Okay, so let's say you are a resolution professional, you're representing some creditor, right? Not the one who was part of this preferential transaction. So you will have to basically prove that, see, this was a preferential transaction, this has put the other creditor in the benefit. But let's say you are the one to whom the preference was done and someone is accusing you, so you'll have to defend that no, this was not a preferential transaction, this was done very well in the ordinary course of business, or this was a commercial decision, whatever the case may be. So just see, but ultimately what is happening, it is putting the creditor in a benefit, right? Or the surety or to the guarantor, it's providing a benefit to them, and such a transfer has the effect of putting such creditor in a beneficial position. So benefit for the creditor, and it is putting you in a beneficial position then you would have been in case the distribution of assets would have been done under section 53. Now for the avoidance of such transactions, so where the liquidator, so Astaji, if you see here, you also have the resolution professional. Okay, so when the liquidator or the resolution professional, as the case may be, is of the opinion that the corporate debtor has at relevant time given preference in such transaction to any person, he shall apply to the adjudicating authority for the avoidance of preferential transaction. Okay, guys, clear?
Yes, sir.
And then there is a deeming provision where it says that the transaction will be deemed to be a preferential transaction if it was done with the related party during the 2 years preceding to the, now just see, it is insolvency commencement date, not the liquidation, or if it is was done with a other than related party, then 1 year preceding to the insolvency commencement date. Is this clear? Is this clear? So let's read this section. So just see, what does it say? So the entire section 43 and 44 I have summed up in just 2 points here in the 2 paragraphs. So just see, you have where the liquidator or the resolution professional, as the case may be, okay, where the liquidator or the resolution professional, as the case may be, is of the opinion that the corporate debtor has at relevant time given a preference in such transaction and in such manner laid down in subsection 2 to any person referred to in subsection 4, he shall apply to the NCLT, that's the adjudicating authority, for the avoidance of the preferential transaction and for one more of such order referred to in under section 44. So just see, The corporate debtor shall be deemed to have given preference if the transfer was done, right? And so basically this is putting the beneficial position. So these 2 points that I have discussed. Then preference shall not include for the corporate debtor, or basically for the following it shall not include if the transfer was made in the ordinary course of business. So if it was made in the ordinary course of business, then there is no problem. Then the transfer creating the security interest was acquired by the corporate debtor to the extent that the security interest secures the new value of the asset. So what does this mean? This means that I had created a security interest. Okay. So take for example, charge. So charge was created for 10 lakh rupees. Now you have to see why this charge was created, because I had purchased the asset for 10 lakh rupees. The corporate debtor had purchased the asset for 10 lakh rupees for me from me. So I created the charge for 10 lakh rupees. Do you understand? Now this will not be called as a preferential transaction, because even though you have not transferred the asset to me, but you have created a security interest. So by creating this security interest, you have made me a secured creditor, which can put me into a beneficial position. So here there is no problem. Why? Because you are creating the security interest to secure the new value of asset. Guys, do you understand? When this will become a problem? This will become a problem when I would say that I have basically created the security interest for a old debt. I had given you some amount, let's say 1 year back, 6 months back, and now after 6 months, after 1 year, after some time period, you are creating the security interest on the asset. So that is not allowed. But if you take a new asset, you are buying a new asset, and on that new asset, you are creating the security interest, right? After signing the security agreement, then there is no problem, right? And such transfer was also registered with the information utility, right? So this is there. Then explanation is there. What is new value? So new value is basically any new goods or services or new credit which was released, right? This is there. Anyway, the time period which was relevant is for the related party 2 years, and the preference is given to other than related party for 1 year. What order would be passed? So the adjudicating authority may, on the application of the resolution professional or the liquidator by order, require that the property which was transferred should be given back to the corporate debtor. Do you understand? The assets will be now given back to the corporate debtor, or require the property to be vested if it represents the application, either the proceeds. So now just see, if let's say the other person to whom this asset was transferred, right? The preferential transaction was done. The corporate debtor has given to Mansi, like I've given my asset to Mansi, and it's a preferential transaction that I have done. Now court will ask Mansi that please give the asset back. Mansi says that I have already sold the asset. So court would say give the money back. Got it? Guys, this is clear. Court would say give the money back. Third is Mansi would say, okay, I'm giving you the asset back. But court would again object. Wait, you are not just going to transfer the asset. This asset was given to you 1.5 years back. And from 1.5 years, you have given this asset on lease, on which you are getting lease rent also. Please give the lease rent also. Got it? So if there is any benefit which was received, you will have to restore that also. Okay.
Okay.
राइट? एसेट भी मांगेगा, एसेट बेच दिया तो उसके जो पैसे हैं वो भी आपसे मांगे जाएंगे, और अगर एसेट को रखने के दौरान आपको कोई बेनिफिट अराइज हुआ तो कोर्ट बोलेगा, एनसीएलटी बोलेगा वो बेनिफिट्स भी आप रिटर्न करो. ओके. If you have created any security interest, that security interest will also be discharged. That security interest will be released. So no more security interest would be there. Then it will also direct the guarantor, right? Whose financial debts or the operational debts is owed to any person, right? So basically any other order which will be passed, that this was given the preference, so all this will be cancelled. Guys, this is clear. So ये एक आपका पूरा section यहाँ पे है. ये explanation है. So this is all basic reading. If you can do, it's fine. Otherwise, this is relevant for you. Preferential transaction and the avoidance of preferential transaction. Now, next that you have is the undervalued transaction. So what happens in case of undervalued transactions? So same like preferential transaction, in case of undervalued transaction, I am selling a asset which is worth 1000 crore to Mansi for a lesser amount. I have sold it for 200 crores only to Mansi. Now, why there is a problem in this? Even if I'm selling it for 200 crore, it's because quite possible I and Mansi, we both have come to an understanding telling that Mansi, I will sell you the asset of 1000 crore for 200 crores only. Later on, you can sell this in the market and recover 1000 crore. 800 crore is going to be your profit. Keep 300 crore in your pocket. Give me 500 crores. So as a promoter, I have made a secret profit. But in this case, who is going to lose money? This is at the cost of whom? This is at the cost of the creditors and the other shareholders, because the reason is the liquidator will realize 800 crore less, due to which either the shareholders are going to get the less money, and if let's say the money gets exhausted before, then some of the creditors are not going to get the money. So in this case, the avoidance of undervalued transaction, again the responsibility is on the liquidator or the corporate debtor. So the liquidator or the corporate debtor. Okay. So the liquidator or the resolution professional, as the case may be, will examine the transactions of the corporate debtor and will find out if there was any undervalued transaction that was undertaken. And if he finds such undervalued transaction, he will make an application. He shall make an application to the adjudicating authority, right? To declare that the transactions are void and again reverse the effect of this transaction. Now, when will you say these are undervalued transaction? When I'm making a gift, okay, or where I enter into a transaction with such person, okay, for a value. Just see the consideration, for a consideration, the value of which is significantly less than the value of the consideration provided by the corporate debtor. Okay, so 1000 ka 200 crores you'll fall here, or if I give it as a gift to Mansi, and this has not taken place in the ordinary course of business. If it takes place in the ordinary course of business, then again it is not. So this is again a common point. Everywhere you'll see this. If the transaction is being entered in the ordinary course of business, there is no problem. What is the relevant time period? So again, for a related party, 2 years, and non-related party, it is 1 year. So related party, 2 years, other person, it is going to be 1 year. And again, from the insolvency commencement date. And thereafter, the NCLT may require independent expert to assess the transaction, and then the application will be made. Guys, this is clear. Guys, this is clear. Now for these undervalued transaction, it is not just the liquidator or the resolution professional would go. If let's say any other creditor, okay, if any other creditor, now take for example, let's say Sri Devi ji, she realizes, even Pawan sees that there is a problem here, this transaction should not have been taken place, this has taken place. So what they are going to do, they are going to inform to the resolution professional or to the liquidator, but the liquidator is not taking any action. Maybe the liquidator is also now involved in that. He's also got some illegal gains or the unethical gains. Now in this case, under section 47, the creditor has been empowered that the creditor can make the application to the NCLT for the undervalued transaction. So just see where an undervalued transaction has taken place and the liquidator or the resolution professional, as the case may be, has not reported. So just see when can the person go? When these transactions are not reported to the adjudicating authority, then the creditor, member, or the partner of the corporate debtor, as the case may be, may make an application to the adjudicating authority to declare such transaction void. Okay, to declare such a transaction void and then again reverse. So the application can be made by any person. Okay, it can be done by any person. Just see a creditor, member, or the partner of the corporate debtor. So even the shareholder can go and file the application there. Then just see where the adjudicating authority is satisfied after the application, then again it will pass the order and make this entire transaction as void. Okay. Guys, this is clear. And restore the benefit. So just see what is going to be the order in case of undervalued transaction. It will ask, please return back the property. If the property is not there, release the amount, basically security interest. If any benefits are received, repay that. And it will also require that if any consideration. So let's say uh, you had sold the property. I had sold the property to Mansi for 400 crore. However, the market value was 1000 crore. Now, what is going to happen if Mansi has already disposed of the property, or if the property is consumed? Mansi will be asked to pay 600 crores. So Mansi would be said that either return the property or give us 600 crore more if you cannot return the property. So let's say it was a uh, it was a freehold property. It was a land which I had given it to Mansi. Now Mansi has already constructed some buildings and all. So it will be very unviable if the buildings are being destroyed and all those things. So here in this case, Mansi would be said that, okay, not a problem. Don't destroy your buildings. Pay 600 crore because this is valued at 1000 crore. So you should have paid 1000 crore. Since you got the benefit of 600 crore, give us the benefit. 400 crore you have already paid. Not a problem, pay 600 crores more. So this is the order in case of undervalued transactions. Guys, this is clear. Guys, this is clear. ये clear हुआ?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you have section 49. So just see, ये आपको अब देखो, ये हमने यहाँ पे, आप ये देखो, ये अंडर वैल्यू ट्रांजैक्शन हमने पूरा सेक्शन पढ़ा. अब ये देखो, ये अंडर वैल्यू ट्रांजैक्शंस के लिए आपको यहाँ पर पूरा पॉइंट मिल जाएगा. ठीक है, ये मैंने यहाँ पे लिखा है transactions to defraud the creditors. This is also the same thing. अब आप यहाँ पे देखो, you'll find the same thing, undervalued transaction. So the transaction shall be considered as undervalued where the corporate debtor makes the gift to a person or enters into a transaction with the person which involves the transfer of one or more property by the corporate debtor for a consideration which is significantly less than the value of the consideration which is provided by the corporate debtor. And this is not search, this is such. Okay, so as I said you may find these kind of error is because it was speech to text. So this is not search, this is such. Okay, and if such transaction had not taken place in the ordinary course of business, and if the liquidator or the resolution professional do not submit, then again the application can be made by any other person also. Also in this case, disciplinary proceeding is going to be initiated, right? The NCLT is going to initiate, not basically initiate, NCLT is going to forward the application to IBBI so that the disciplinary proceeding can be initiated, because when the resolution professional came across this undervalued transaction and the resolution professional did not report it to NCLT, so this is basically the disciplinary, this is one of the reason against, because of which the disciplinary proceeding can be initiated. So यहाँ पे NCLT IBBI को एप्लीकेशन देगा और बोलेगा दैट डिसिप्लिनरी प्रोसीडिंग्स अब आप स्टार्ट करो against this particular liquidator or this resolution professional. Okay, so this is one of the ground. So remember this part. Now you have extortionate credit transaction. So what does extortionate credit transaction means? It means a credit transaction which is unreasonable, high value credit transaction which is unreasonable. So before the CIRP had commenced, I have taken a loan from Mansi. Now I have agreed that I will pay 30% interest to Mansi. So this is what this is, extortionate credit transaction. Okay. So again, in case of extortionate credit transaction, the entire transaction would be made void. Or let's say I've taken loan for 30% interest. Now court would say no, 30% is unreasonable. 12% is the standard rate of interest. So reverse the 18% interest, right? In both the case, whatever benefit I have provided to Mansi, that would be restored. So just see, extortionate credit transaction is a transaction that shall be considered as extortionate credit transaction where The terms require the corporate debtor to make an exorbitant payment. So what is exorbitant? A high value, unreasonable. Just see, I'll write it here. All means same. These all means same. So this means unreasonable. If you default, there is a penalty of 100% of the principal amount. So this is like unreasonable if you put these kind of terms. So just see, if you enter into a transaction with such terms which requires to make an exorbitant payment or provides an unconscionable under the principles of the law of the contract, then in that case, this will be called as extortionate credit transaction. Now, where a corporate debtor has been party to the extortionate credit transaction, in which involves the receipt of financial or operational debt during the period within 2 years from the insolvency commencement date, or the resolution professional, as the case may be, may make an application to this. So just understand, right now you don't have for extortionate credit transaction, irrespective whether it's the related party or with not a related party, 2 years is the standard time period. Then in that case, the either the liquidator or the resolution professional can make the application, and then that transaction would be made void. So just see this, either restore the position as it was, set aside the whole or part of that, modify the terms, require the person to repay any amount which has been already received. So if let's say I've paid 30% interest, Mansi, please return the 30% interest, and also if the security interest which was created, that will also be cancelled. Guys, this is clear. This is clear. Extortionate credit transaction. So these are all short questions which can be asked. So I've been saying this from last 2-3 attempts that I feel this will be asked in your attempt. So till now they have not asked it, but I strongly believe that these are the questions on which institute can test you. And believe me, when the institute is going to test students on these cases, right, it will be a mess, because people usually leave all these topics believing that these are not important since they have not been asked in the exam before. So liquidation part is still, I would say, untouched, and I believe that you should study it well. And it's not even rocket science. I believe it is far easier than the CIRP process. I don't know whether you guys would agree to this or not. But personally, when I read, I found it very, very simple. There is no multiple, like COC, then in the committee of creditors who will be there, then you have the representatives and all those things, IRP, then RP. Here you have only one liquidator when you know what is the end story that you have to do. So academically, at least it looks like very easy. The liquidation part looks very easy here. Now you have section 52. Now section 52 is again something which will not be straightforward asked in the exam. What happens in case of section 62, section 52? Here the secured creditor having fixed charge on a particular asset, okay, can relinquish the security interest. Okay, so Mansi, take example of that car. So Mansi can take the car, realize the money, right, realize the money, and can repay the balance amount to the liquidator. Or Mansi can relinquish the security interest, okay, and Mansi can tell to the liquidator that it is okay, you only go and sell this asset. The asset memorandum contains the valuation which is done by the registered valuer. So please take valuation from the registered valuer and do the valuation. Guys, clear? And realize it. The valuation has been already done. You only go and realize. I said do valuation, not valuation. You only do the sale part. The valuation is already done. The asset memorandum states that this can be sold for 10 lakh rupees. So you only go and sell it for 10 lakh rupees, realize the value and give it to me. If let's say the value is realized for less than 10 lakh, then of course the creditor would be involved and said that just see, the asset memorandum says that the asset can be realized for 10 lakh rupees, but we are not getting a buyer. So if you find a buyer who can take it for 10 lakh rupees, it's good. Otherwise, we are getting the best rate which we are getting is, let's say, 7 lakh rupees. So we can only realize 7 lakh. So accordingly, whatever is done. So this is the position of the secured creditor in the liquidation proceeding. It is that if the secured creditor relinquish the secured asset, or the secured creditor can realize the security interest and then pay the balance amount to the liquidator. Also, one more thing here, Mansi, when realizing 10 lakh rupees and keeping her 1 lakh rupees to her, the 10 lakh was the realization value of the asset and her debt was only 1 lakh rupees. So she will not get entire 1 lakh rupees. She will also have to pay proportionate for the liquidation expenses and all. And if the liquidator realizes the asset, liquidator is going to deduct the percentage towards the liquidation as estate, his remuneration and everything, and he's going to pay that. So just remember this part. In both the cases, this is going to happen. Now, how the creditor is going to prove that yes, I have a secured asset over this particular asset? It could be because of the records which is of security interest, which is maintained by the information utility, or through any other means which is specified by the board, which is basically that you need to prove that this is there, right? So this is what is given. A secured creditor may enforce, realize, settle, compromise, or deal with the secured asset in accordance with the law, realize the asset and proceeds and recover its dues. Okay, so this is what is here. So just see, again I have written it in the precise way that the secured creditor in the liquidation proceeding has the option either to relinquish the security interest to the liquidation estate or receive the money. So Sridevi ji has asked a question like secured creditor can directly sell the assets if he gets good value. Exactly, Sridevi ji. This is exactly the same payment. The secured creditor can directly sell the assets. The person can say, so here Mansi could say that, okay, so let's say let's reverse the position. Mansi can, okay, let's say the value of loan of Mansi is 10 lakh rupees. The asset can realize only 1 lakh. So Mansi is secured for what amount? 1 lakh or 10 lakh?
10 lakh.
1 lakh. You are secured only to the extent the value will be realized from the asset. It's not that you will not be paid balance 9 lakh, but for balance 9 lakh, you will be an unsecured creditor. Why? Because you have created a fixed charge. मानसी अगर आपको याद हो CS एग्जीक्यूटिव में लिक्विडेशन के अंदर ऐसा क्वेश्चन आता था, जिस भी क्रेडिटर का फिक्स चार्ज होता था, secured creditor having fixed charge, secured creditor having floating charge. If you remember, the statement of affair used to be made. याद है?
Yes, sir.
तो उसमें कोई डेफिशिएंसी होता था, तो वो डेफिशिएंसी के लिए the creditor used to become unsecured. Yes or no?
Yes.
If you remember, liquidation accounts भी जब आप बनाते थे, तो डेबिट साइड पे ऑन एसेट्स, डेबिट साइड यूज्ड टू राइट टू रियलाइजेशन ऑफ द सिक्योर्ड एसेट, लेट्स से 10 लाख रुपीस लेस द लायबिलिटी पेड. 1 लाख तो सरप्लस कंट्रीब्यूट हो जाता था, बट अगर डेफिशिएंसी आता था तो फिर उसको हम अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर के साथ पे करते थे, राइट? सो you are secured only up to the maximum value which can be realized from the asset. If your value is 10 lakh rupees, the asset is realized for 50 lakh. So you cannot say my 50 lakh is secured. You would still say my 10 lakh is only secured. So 10 lakh, that is the amount of debt or the value of asset which is recovered, whichever is lower. So you can do this. Now, when the secured creditor opts to realize the security interest, he must inform the liquidator, right, and identify the asset subject to the security interest to be realized. And in the course of realization of the secured asset, any secured creditor faces resistance from the corporate debtor in taking the possession. Then again, the secured creditor can make the application to NCLT that ye dekho ye maan nahi raha. NCLT will then make the order, right, and permit the sale of the assets for its realization. The amount of insolvency. So this is what I was saying, that you will have to still pay. So the amount of insolvency resolution process cost due from secured creditor who realize their security interest shall be deducted from the proceeds of any realization by the secured creditor, and they shall transfer the amount to the liquidator to be included in the liquidation estate. So still you cannot recover your entire amounts. You'll have to pay percentage of your proceeds towards the security towards the liquidation cost. So if you remember, in executive accounts, you used to make that liquidators account, remember? And in that liquidators account, there was a standard format which was taught to you, something like this: to asset realized, and then there was on the credit side, there was a sequence by liquidation expense, by liquidator remuneration, and all those things. So it does not go this way. Practically it does not go this way. So as and when you realize the asset and you pay to the creditor, you keep a percentage with you and the balance is paid to the creditor. Okay. And of course, if there is surplus, that is paid, 100% is paid. But let's say the amount is not, then the portion of the asset realized will be again utilized for the payment of the proceeds, right? And the existence of the security interest can be proved by all these things. Anything you can prove. Okay. So this is then realization by the secured creditor. So this is the same point which is there. Now the distribution of the assets. This is an important section. The waterfall provision, how the assets will be realized and how in what sequence it will be paid. So just see, first and foremost, the insolvency resolution process cost and the liquidation cost should be paid in full. Thereafter, the workman dues will be paid for 24 months and the debts will be paid to the secured creditor who has relinquished the security interest. If you have relinquished the security interest, it will be declared. Basically, the amount will be paid to you along with the workmen for their 24 months dues. Then the wages and salaries for the employees for a period of 12 months. Then the financial debts, which are for the unsecured creditor. So earlier unsecured creditor was not bifurcated, but now financial debts to the unsecured creditor. Thereafter, the debts will be paid to the government and also to the secured creditor who has enforced the security interest and the amount still remains unpaid. So Mansi, that example, the car is for 1 lakh rupees, your loan is for 9 lakh rupees. You recover only 1 lakh. So 1 lakh will be paid to you here. This will be paid to you 1 lakh. 1 lakh will be paid to you here. Or let's say if you relinquish the asset, 1 lakh will be paid to you here and the balance 9 lakh will be paid here. Okay. And then after this, all the remaining dues and so let's say, for example, you have not paid your salaries for last 18 months to your employees. So 12 months will be paid here and the balance 6 months will be paid here. So any other debts which are there that will be paid except the payments which are to be made to preference and equity. Thereafter, the claims of the preference shareholder and at last the claims of the equity shareholder. Okay. Is this clear? This sequence is important, that what is in what sequence the distribution will be done. So the distribution will be done in this way. So try to remember this: the insolvency resolution process cost and the liquidator remuneration, then the workman dues for 24 months along with the debts due to the secured creditor who has relinquished the security interest, thereafter wages and salaries for the 12 months, financial debts to the unsecured creditor, and then the government dues and also the dues which will be paid for to the secured creditor for any deficient or under realization of the assets. Thereafter, the debts to the other creditors, then preference shareholders, and then last to the equity shareholders, or in case it's a LLP, then to the partners. Once this is being done, thereafter, the final report will be submitted before dissolution by the liquidator to the NCLT, and then NCLT is going to submit, basically pass the dissolution order, and that copy of the order will be submitted to the authority. That's the ROC, that the corporate debtor is now dissolved. Guys, clear? Is this clear? Is this point clear?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Liquidation. So this is all is there in the liquidation of the corporate debtor. Right now we have the fast track CIRP process. So fast track CRP process will start from tomorrow. Just revise this part. Do it today itself. I'll tell you it won't take more than 1 hour to revise entire liquidation process. And the questions I've already said you, which are likely to be asked in the exam. Okay. Is this clear?
Sure, sir.
All right then. Take care.
Yes, sir.
Bye bye. See you tomorrow.
Bye, sir. Thank you. Take
Yes,
care.
sir.
Yeah.
Bye, sir.